His name is Peng Jingzhang. He is 70 years old. In 1963, he graduated from Peking University with a degree in archaeology. When he was 49, he came to Dunhuang, beginning an archaeological saga with the Mogal caves. In the past 21 years, he frequents the two banks of the Dachuan River, and during the fall, the winding trails through the forest on one side. Across the river, on a cliff some 1,600 meters tall, runs some 735 caves. How did this cave formation come to pass, and who made it? These are the questions that the archaeologist seeks to answer. There are 4 keys to the Mogal caves, which opens the gate to 492 caves. The year is 848 AD. The chaos begun by the Anxi rebellion has been raging near Dunhuang for 93 years. At this time, a man by the name of Zhang Yichao rallied the local soldiers and civilians, and after a bloody battle, retook the city. Three years later, the imperial court raised an official army to retake the region. With Zhang Yichao as its leader, after receiving his orders, Zhang Yichao wasted no time in starting his campaign. On the south cave wall of Mogao's Cave of Merit, Zhang Yichao commissioned a large fresco that spanned the entire wall, detailing the glories of his campaign. This fresco remains well preserved, even in modern times. When the Zhang family was renovating this cave, they left an inscription on the northern wall of the cave's antechamber. The inscription was important for researchers who came to Mogao to research the history of the area. However, due to the natural weathering, much of the ink inscriptions have been eroded away. Luckily, a document found in the library cave have recorded what was originally inscribed upon that wall. In this document titled The Chronicles of the Mogal Caves, the entire history of the construction of the caves is laid bare for all to read. In the second year of the former Qin Dynasty, that is 366 AD, northern China was embroiled in the turmoil of the 16 Kingdoms period. People longed for the land to return to peace. Buddhism was flourishing, and Buddhist preachers from India and Central Asia were a common sight along the Silk Road. At this time, a traveling monk called Le Zun started his journey west, when during a brief stop at Mingsha Mountain near Dunhuang, he was struck by a vision of 1,000 radiant Buddhas in the distance. In order to record this mystical sight, Le Zun immediately ceased his traveling and excavated the first of the Mogal caves, on the east cliff face of Mingsha. Like all of his fellow researchers, Peng Jinzhang spends most of his time at the Mogal caves. In these caves, which have existed for over a millennia, any ignored detail could lead to a groundbreaking revelation.
There's frescoes at my feet and over my head.
Yes, I see.
This cave record is follows. Look, on the bottom, right over here. It's white and bare. This means there's no drawings from before the Northern Liang. This dates before the Northern Liang, which was around...
Scholars estimate that cave number 268 is one of the first caves excavated on the cliff face. The main camber is only man height and about 1 meter wide. There are 4 small alcoves arrayed along the north and south faces, each only large enough to fit a single person sitting. They're meant to serve as meditation chambers. Scholars can't say for certain whether it was the first cave at Mogal, but they are certain about this. The cave that Le Zun excavated was a meditation chamber. The layout of the cave originated from the birthplace of Buddhism. India, Sakya Muni was said to have meditated in a cave sitting facing towards the west, away from the commotion of the cities and isolated from the weather. Mogal's caves' first constructions were started with an eye towards facilitating meditation.
This is one of the small meditation chambers in a meditation cave. Look, this is a meditation platform.
Ever since Buddhism spread into China's western regions, many stone cave temples have been built along the way. Wherever the local geology permitted it, the terrain surrounding the Mogal caves are comprised mainly of loose granite from the Jiuquan Formation dating from the Quaternary period, which is easy to excavate. Across the cliffs is the wide Daquan River, flowing from the south to the north through the area. Though it has experienced its shared droughts, 1,000 years ago, spring water flowing through the many ravines of the Mount Sunway fed into the river, which in turn fed white poplars which grew along its banks in abundance. The river, coupled with clear blue skies, good climate, and proximity to the trade hub of Dunhuang, meant that the rock formation was a good candidate for the constant cave excavations throughout the centuries of human habitation. In cave number 275, there are several small eaves dug into walls to the north and the south. This is a signature architectural style of the Central Plains. The small caisse contains small statues of the Buddha at their corners, each with a small smile on their face. As time went on, more and more caves were excavated as shrines where people came with offerings for the Buddha. These caves changed the layout of the India-inspired caves, adding in a legacy from the cultures of the central steppes. Because of limited manpower and material, the early caves were very small, their layout sparse, and the caves themselves haphazardly dotted the cliffside. This continued until 439 AD, in the course of the Northern Wei's campaign to subdue the north. The dynasty conquered northern Liang. Many skilled craftsmen escaped to Dunhuang from Liangzhou ahead of the conflict. Later, many government officials, craftsmen, and Buddhist clergymen moved to Dunhuang from Luoyang. It is the new wave of immigration to the region that led to the first large-scale excavation of the Mogal caves, bringing with it a new wave of Central Plains aesthetic. This is Cave 285, the best evidence of this period of constructions. On the western walls are gods from Buddhism and Hinduism, but the artistic styles have been molded by local alterations, taking on Central Asian, Western Chinese aesthetics, and in other areas of the cave we can see then prevalent patterns indicative of the Central Chinese plains.
Take this depiction of Bodhisattva. Its visage is thin and clean. He's wearing a tall crown and has long-sleeved robes. It has an air of nobility.
This air of nobility is an artistic style that was brought west from China, no longer limited to paper scrolls. It has spread to the frescoes inside the caves of Mogal.
It can be found in the statues and in the bricks.
Yeah, it's clear that they're all from China.
A clearer example of Chinese influence is painted on the bucket-shaped roof of the cave, where many cultures intertwined. The gods, demons, and saints of Chinese mythology and the many beads of Buddhism are arrayed on the truncated pyramidal roof. The four slopes can disperse the weight over the roof outwards, increasing the structural integrity of the caves, while increasing its internal space, and became the standard layout of future excavations at the Mogal Caves. This is a new innovation that came out after the practice of excavating cave shrines spread to China. So who, then, is responsible for excavating this cave? Scholars place more importance on finding out the benefactor of a particular cave than even the artists who then decorated it. The donor is the one who funds the entire construction process. His influence is found in all areas inside the cave. All that is left is to find the marks.
The 4th year of the Wei Dynasty. This coincides with the reign of the king of the eastern Dunhuang over Guazhou.
In Cave 285, at the bottom of a fresco dedicated to the portraits of the cave's financiers, is a couple bed-necked in courtly regalia, which was at the time reserved solely for high-ranking officials. This is very likely the depiction of the provincial regent Yuanrong.
It's very likely that these two were the lord and lady of the Eastern Sun.
The Lord of the Eastern Sun, Yuanrong, is the first in line of royal relatives turned administrators to take rule over Dunhuang. When he was at Dunhuang, he personally paid for transcriptions of large amounts of Buddhist manuscripts. Of the cache of artifacts found at the library cave, there is a passage in the document, the Prajna Paramita, of the kind king, which reads, "Brother Yuanrong, tireless to the end, always toiling, far from his homeland, righteous to all, used his own salary to make sutras. May he attain Buddhahood in the afterlife." It isn't hard to understand the meaning of this excerpt. Yuanrong, who was sent far from his place of birth, sought tranquility and compassion from Buddhism. Gradually, Mogal was turned into pilgrimage destination, where people came from all around to seek good fortunes, safe refuge, and perform their religious duties by excavating new caves. The Mogal Caves may have endured for over a millennium through the ravages of time, but its history was not always fortunate. In 557 AD, northern China underwent yet another dynastic upheaval, and the Northern Wei was succeeded by the Northern Zhou. Within a few short decades, the dynasty was ruled by 3 separate emperors. In these uncertain times, more and more laymen sought to escape strife via monkhood, swelling the clergy's numbers to roughly 10% of the total population. This greatly threatened the ruling regime's economy and authority. Thus, in AD 574, by order of Zhou Emperor Wudi, the dynasty began a campaign to purge Buddhist influence. Luckily, amidst this chaos, Dunhuang was ignored, allowing the area to escape the ensuing carnage. "15 years later, Sui Wendi ended the 300-year-long period of disunity that had gripped China, ushering in the Sui Dynasty. The man who would become Wendi was born in Shanxi as young Jian in a nunnery. Raised by the nuns, he was a devout Buddhist, and upon taking the throne, he ordered all Buddhist sites damaged by the previous dynasty repaired and constructed a stupa at Dunhuang. He and his son Yangguang poured resources into the western regions, improving the quality of life for the residents of those regions. Within 3 decades of his reign, the number of caves at Mogal blossomed past 100, turning the cliff face into a veritable beehive. When excavating a stone cave, one must first consider the opening's position and shape on the cliff wall before any preliminary work. After a work tunnel is dug, work can continue outwards and upwards to open the cave. With that initial tunnel used to move the resultant debris, once the roof is complete, work can progress downwards, creating the complete layout of the cave. After that, cosmetic fixes are applied where needed before the cave is considered finished. While the tools involved are simple, countless craftsmen toiled away shovel by shovel, creating the magnificent structures along the cliffside by hand. On the outskirts of the Mogal Caves stands the most distinctive and eye-catching structure of all the caves, Cave 96, also known as the 9-storied tower. This red-painted edifice juts proudly out of the mountainside, its glory apparent to all. In 1999, the history of Cave 96 remained a mystery to the archaeological community. That autumn, Jin Zhang led a team to this cave and began his excavation. During this excavation, Jin Zhang found another distinct layer of flooring under the first. Upon digging deeper, he could hardly contain his surprise. A series of layers was revealed, each from different dynasties, showing that the cave was the result of different periods of activity. Thus, the 9-story tower's construction's history emerged from the murk. It was 684 AD. Wu Zetian had taken the throne, and relations with the imperial court remained delicate. At that time, Jiang Huayi, Seng Faming, and other monks fabricated the so-called Cloud Sutra to appease Wu Zetian, because the empress' claim to the throne was declaring herself to be the incarnation of Maitreya. This sutra pleased her greatly. Thus, when Wu Zetian officially took the throne as empress in 690 AD, she called herself the Sacred and Divine Empress Regnant. The nation followed her coronation with a wave of Buddhist fervor. This fervor was the impetus for the construction of Cave 96. This sculpture of Maitreya Buddha is the only object in the cave which is otherwise known as the Large Sculpture Cave. It is said that its face is modeled after the likeness of Wu Zetian. According to experts, a cave this large was a difficult undertaking. First, a tunnel must be dug out at the cave's highest reaches, form the roof. Work can then begin downwards. A second tunnel must then be dug directly under the first to move excavation debris out of the cave. This pattern continued all the way to the bottom. With careful calculation, the positioning of the tunnels could also augment the cave's internal lighting. The sculpture's gut is filled using debris left over from excavating the caves that's been set aside especially. According to experts, a cave of this size requires years, if not decades, of work to complete. There are not clear records regarding the exact start date of construction for Cave 96. However, for renovation work done in 966 AD, 56 carpenters and 10 clay sculptors were employed. Over a 10-day period, the project was only able to replace 2 stories worth of wooden supports. Judging by those records, the amount of craftsmen employed for the initial construction must have been enormous. Fast forward to today, and we can get a feeling for the grandeur of the Tang Dynasty in its prime. In flows the great river, its waves reflected. That tall cliff, with its solitary cave, had blossomed into a site of 1,000 niches. Under the Tang, it is clear that in that time, the Mogal caves entered its own golden era. Nearly half of the caves at Mogal were built during the Tang Dynasty. The steles that were inscribed on the behest of the private donors have become important primary resources in the modern era. Cave 148, built during the Mid-Tang era, is open to tourists who come every day in an endless stream. In the entry chamber stands as a testament. Mogal Caves, number 148, High Tang stele commemorating the deeds of the humble Sir Li of Longxi of Tang. Year 14 of Tang Tianbao, that is 755 AD, the Anshi Rebellion was in full swing. Troops garrisoned at Heshi were redirected to contain the situation in the Central Plains. This left Dunhuang without guardians, sinking the region into chaos and fighting. A message seeking urgent relief was sent to the court, as the besieged residents at Dunhuang anxiously awaited relief. However, rescue was nowhere to be found. The defenders became more and more desperate. The commanding officer was even beginning to contemplate desertion. In this critical time, he received an invitation to the Mogal Caves to inspect a newly opened cave temple. This cave's layout, similar in shape to a coffin, is the unique feature of the Nirvana Cave. Nirvana is the Buddhist term for the enlightenment and sensationless paradise that is achieved after long meditation, that frees one from the endless cycle of suffering, life, death, then rebirth. The artist's impressions of the scenery of this Buddhist paradise is depicted in this cave, on a fresco that covers 3 walls circling around a sculpture of Sakya Muni. Countless Buddha are depicted onto the roof above, serving as the guardians of this mystical paradise. The owner of this cave is a man called Li Dabin, a man of the local aristocracy. The Nirvana Cave was completed when the war was ravaging Dunhuang, while the soldiers and residents of the city decided to fight to the death against its besiegers. Winter had already arrived in the region, and all of Li Dabin's influence could buy him no reprieve. He decided to escape the city, but as he was making ready to leave, he was caught by the defenders and sentenced to execution. Afterwards, the city held on for 11 bitter years. Finally, after running out of supplies and with no rescue in sight, the defenders were forced to surrender. Still remain. Aside from the impressive caves funded by prominent families, lay people have also constructed numerous smaller caves on the cliffside. This cave, only several square meters in size, was constructed by a middle-class family of the late Tang. Aside from family members, even the humble household servants contributed to its construction. The servants' clothing, as depicted on the walls, are very simple. Upon an inscription, it is written that the mother of the servants paid for 6 figurines of Buddha as she would gladly trade money for virtue. In Dunhuang, countless generations sought their spiritual well-being here, regardless of their own personal wealth. At this time, the heartland of China was thrown into chaos due to the machinations of men like Feng Zheng, greatly diminishing the power of the Tang Dynasty. Finally, in 907 AD, 1,800 kilometers away from Dunhuang, the capital of Chang'an, was destroyed. The once glorious Tang had reached its end, ushering in the tumultuous era of the 10 kingdoms and 5 dynasties. Due to its remoteness from the capital, at this time, Dunhuang remained largely independent, while the emperor's center was embroiled in conflict. There was no war here. In 914 AD, Dunhuang came under the thumb of a new ruler, Cao Yijin. He repaired relations with neighboring powers and restarted agriculture. Dunhuang returned to a semblance of its past activity and economic splendor. The Mogal caves underwent another phase of major excavations. Adding to the abundant history and experience of cave construction in the region, this provided to the last of the cave's golden ages of activity. Cave 61 is one of Mogal Cave's largest caves. The sponsor was the 4th regent of the Cao clan's Gui army, Cao Yuanzhong, and his wife. This is a central altar cave. The surface area of the floor is 196 square meters, and it is 9.5 meters at its tallest, equivalent to a 3-story building in height. Because of its size, when excavating the cave, a central pillar was left uncleared in order to support its structure. Upon this pillar were various vibrant decorations creating a sense of courtly splendor. The caves of this time period have been completely Sinicized, as the Cao clan oversaw their wave of constructions and renovated the previous generation's caves. The Mogal caves expanded to their largest historical extent. The caves containing frescoes and sculptures are largely concentrated upon the cliff's southern region. Thus, experts have divided the Mogal caves into 2 regions, north and south. In the southern region, from the northern and southern dynasties to the Yuan, have seen the creation of meditation caves and central altar caves totaling 487 in all. In these caves, there are in total 45,000 square meters of frescoes and over 3,000 sculptures. However, in the northern region of Mogal, the cave's layout is not defined and the records unclear. Its status was long regarded as an archaeological wasteland. But what was the purpose of the caves to the north? What was their relation to the caves in the south? Pan Jinjiang found himself filled with curiosity.
This is related to the region's climate.
To everyone's surprise, trove upon trove of precious artifacts were rediscovered. The long-forgotten Cave 243 finally had its own numbered plaque.
127, 3.2 meters, 128.
Enduring all climate extremes, the man traversed every corner of the northern region.
This is a ventilation tubing. Look, that's soot, isn't it? And here, sealed with the bricks and tiles, like it was originally a chimney. Smoke would have been let out here. And here, it's like it was meant for cookware or for lighting.
Archaeological evidence proves this cave used to be the living quarters, meditation chambers, and supply stores of Buddhist monks who lived in the area. The crypts, where the monks were buried in the main prayer halls of the southern regions, when linked together, formed a complete stone monastery, the Mogal Caves. It's as if we heard the plinking of the excavation chisels, echoing incessantly from the annals of history, continuing onwards towards the future. During the 5 Dynasties, Song period, maritime trade dominated commerce, while further excavations and Mogal seized under the Yuan. The Jiajing Emperor of the Ming Dynasty sealed the Great Wall at Jiayuguan, causing Shazhou's residents to move inwards into China. Thus, Dunhuang entered a period of hibernation. But this ancient treasure trove, long lost to the ashes of history, was rediscovered by modern civilization during the 20th century. The melodies of the Chinese, ancient Indians, ancient Greeks, and Central Asian cultures merged to create a poetic masterpiece. 7. Our camera recorded an incredible scene up on Mingsha Ridge. Is this perhaps the radiance that Le Zun saw all those centuries ago? Pan Jinjian writes, I also saw this awe-inspiring scenery before. If I didn't like it here, I wouldn't have come. And even if I did come, I would have left. Of the 4 seasons, autumn is the most beautiful in Dunhuang. The blue skies, the golden leaves of the white poplars, everything about it leaves me intoxicated.